Princeton University's Keller Center, educating leaders for a technology-driven society.
The Keller Center was established in 2005, generously endowed by a gift from Dennis and Constance Keller, a trustee, an alumnus, a longtime supporter of the School of Engineering and Applied Science here at Princeton. The mission of the Keller Center is to educate leaders for a technology-driven society. And the center is creating new courses, strengthening existing ones that go beyond the purely technical courses, but actually start to build ties to other areas across campus. And we're also enhancing students' technical educations through internships, entrepreneurial activities, and through exposure to influential leaders like Dr. Levy, through lecture series of this type, as well as other events that we hold. By exposing students to speakers such as Dr. Levy, they see role models and examples of service where leadership, technology, and entrepreneurship intersect to bring about positive changes to society. And so now let me introduce Dr. Levy. Ricardo Levy is an executive and entrepreneur whose career spans more than 3 decades of founding and building successful businesses. Born and raised in South America to a European immigrant family, he completed engineering studies in the United States at Stanford and Princeton before returning to South America to run a family business. In 1969, he sold the business and returned to the United States to complete his PhD at Stanford in the field of catalytic chemistry. In 1974, after a number of years in the petroleum and petrochemical industry, he co-founded his first entrepreneurial venture, Catalytica, a research and development firm serving the chemical, pharmaceutical, and energy industries. The firm's discoveries resulted in over 100 patents and led to the formation of 3 companies, one of which became, under Levy's leadership, the largest supplier to the pharmaceutical industry in North America. Ricardo is also the author of the book Letters to a Young Entrepreneur, in which he shares the insights and experiences that enabled and inspired his journey. He currently serves on several public and private corporate boards of directors and on the advisory board of the Santa Clara University Center for Science, Technology, and Society, the leading global entrepreneurship incubator. Ricardo, thank you for being here with us today, and please join me in welcoming Ricardo Levy.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Are we okay? Wonderful to be here. You know, you said influential. It takes, to be influential, it takes a giver and a receiver, and hopefully the giver has something worth giving, but the receivers need to be also interested in the subject. So I'm very happy that I have you here today. And for me, it's especially important since I came to Princeton. And since I am a chemical engineer, and so hopefully I have a resonance with some of the things that are in your own minds about your own profession and where you want to take your career. So first, before I start, I see a range of ages here. Can I see a show of hands of anybody who is already immersed in the entrepreneurial experience? Okay, good. Hopefully I'll have something very, hopefully we'll relate to some of the experiences that I've had. For the rest of you, I am assuming that you are mostly students and that you have business somewhere in your horizon. And hopefully through today, we'll just talk a little bit about what I've experienced in building companies and what that life is all about. It's also relevant to me because I started off as a student and then eventually as a researcher. And in fact, I started my career doing research. I worked at Exxon, and for a couple of years, I was, on that path, so to speak. And then I switched gears to start my own company. And so this may be relevant to some of your thoughts. Before we start, where do I have the marker?
Right up there.
Oh, wow, good. Let me take the black one. Okay, what I'd like to ask you to do is think of words that characterize in your mind an entrepreneur. Anything that comes to your mind.
Risk.
Say, wait, what?
Risk taker.
Risk taker. Okay. Good.
Courage.
Hold on, give me a sense. Okay, risk taker. What did I hear?
Courage.
Coach?
Courage.
Say that again.
Courage.
Courage. Yes, yes. Yes.
Creativity.
Creativity. Good. Okay.
Profit-driven.
Say that again. What was that?
Profit-driven.
Say
Profit-driven.
profit-driven. Hey, I should not judge. Let me put that in green. Profit-driven. Okay. That one actually, I hadn't thought about it in my thinking as a characteristic, but that one will start an interesting conversation perhaps a little bit later. Anything else?
Well, you want to do something.
Just one word.
I don't know how you say that, but doing something, you know? I mean, you want to make a contribution of some kind, and I don't know how you say it in one word.
Contributor. Good.
Observant. Passionate.
Good. Observant. Let's see.
Vision.
Say again?
A vision.
Vision. So visionary. Anything else?
Purposeful.
Say again?
Purposeful.
Good. One L or two L? One L? I'm very sensitive to my spelling nowadays. Enthusiastic. Very good.
Single-mindedness.
I want to put that one in green too. Not necessarily because I related to that. Well,
Communicator. How about
oh, good.
you have to get your message out.
Yeah. Okay. Well, obviously I have my own list, and I think it encompasses many of those, although some I have not thought of before. So let me show you what my list is. And I just picked a few, and I have a reason to have grouped them like that. But you see many, visionary, clear, articulate, having to do with communication, risk tolerant, passionate. Now what's interesting, first of all, I grouped these because to me they are characteristics of an entrepreneur that are part of the individual's inner makeup. They are characteristics that have to do with how the entrepreneur relates to others. And then there are characteristics that are very deep and very core. And we'll get to these in a few moments. But the interesting question is, when you look at this list, if I had asked you to give me the characteristics of a good leader, wouldn't, in fact, most of these apply? When you think of a good leader, you want a good leader to be enthusiastic, inspiring, articulate. You want him to be passionate, positive. You want him to have integrity, consistency. So the question is, when you ask yourself, what is an entrepreneur? You are coming up, or I came up with a list that could just as well describe a good leader. What then is the essential difference that makes somebody an entrepreneur? is there a difference between the two? Okay, that's really basically the topic that I want to talk about. And in doing so, I want to touch both on entrepreneurship and on leadership. Because many of you, especially you younger people, you may want to become entrepreneurs. You may become entrepreneurs. But what I'm sure all of you would like to do and will be called to do is to become good leaders. So we'll be working with both concepts. But sticking to the issue of entrepreneurship, is there a difference? And I would say yes. And the difference is the depth of the emotional investment. And I will talk more about that, but the depth of the emotional investment is what, to me, is the defining character of the entrepreneur. And in the early stages, it primarily relates to the first group of characteristics that we have up there. For the entrepreneur, the emotional investment is total. And what makes the difference for those of us who got into building our own companies is that we had a dream, and when the dream became all-consuming, it took over, and basically we reached the tipping point. So if you are captured passionately by an idea or a concept, the moment that idea totally engulfs you to the point where you cannot stand it anymore, that starts defining the entrepreneur in you, and it has a big influence on your risk capacity. And we will come back to risk in a few moments, but the main point is that the dream takes over. Okay? Now, what happens when you reach the tipping point? And this is the interesting thing. I mentioned risk capacity. The point is that it's not about risk anymore. I was asked often after I started my companies, were you worried? Did you fear that you were making the right decision? Were you worried about the chances you were taking? Now, in one sense, of course, I had a family. I had 2 children already. I needed to calculate. I only have 2 children. I already had 2 children. Well, I had a third child, my company. But I already had 2 children, so this was not a trivial decision. But what happened is once the dream took over, it wasn't about risk anymore. It was about total conviction. I was absolutely convinced that I was doing the right thing. And that's very important when you think about an entrepreneur, because you reach a point of no return. And once you reach the point of no return, you use all the skills at your disposal to make it work, which in fact then speaks particularly to the next one. And in the list that we have here, we talked about communication, and we talked a lot about how to relate to the outside. Once a person decides to start a company or to get into an entrepreneurial venture, the job really is just starting. The hard part really is ahead, because you know that you cannot do it by yourself. So somehow now you have to bring others into the fold. And to do that, characteristics like clear, articulate, nimble, enthusiastic, inspiring, all are part of the toolbox of the entrepreneur to bring people together to help you. And together, so what I like to do in simplifying this is I like to say that the entrepreneur is a good storyteller. Somebody said storytelling earlier. is a good dancer. I'll explain that in a few minutes. And is a good lover. And I'll explain that in a few minutes. All of which becomes the entrepreneur's equipment for persuasion. So all of these define the entrepreneur's persuasion capacity. So let's talk a little bit about these three. Storyteller is easy. You have to communicate in order to inspire or gather people to join you. Now, it's easy on the surface, but in particular for us technologists or engineers, or let's speak about myself. I thought I was a good communicator, but my mind, my frame of reference was very much a technological, scientific, engineering framework. So I got excited about the technical aspects. I got excited about the details. I was thrilled about molecules. I mean, I could really go on and on about that, when in fact my audience didn't necessarily care for those parts of my story. And so part of the challenge that took me some time to learn is that I needed to be able to learn to tell the story in a way that really reaches my audience. And once you start a business, your audience is multiple. Sometimes you are talking to scientific or technical people, and you can get into that groove. But more often than not, you're talking to financial people. In fact, more often than I care to, I talk to financial people. It's a necessity of growing a business. So you have to talk their language. You talk to employees you want to gather that are not all necessarily technical. You have to talk their language. You talk to the community. You want to set up a manufacturing plant, you have to convince the city council. You can't talk to the city council in technical terms. So the storytelling is something to reflect on as you move into that part. And that is true, I think, in general, whether you went to business or not. The dancer is an interesting concept, and really all it's trying to embody is that the road, once you enter into a business life, is never straight. And the characteristic of the entrepreneur is that when you run into roadblocks, you have the nimbleness to step to the side and find the path to the goal you have. And building companies is replete with stepping aside or being knocked down and getting up and trying something different. And that can be as simple as trying a different approach in a particular conversation, or as complicated as being willing to accept changes in your own ambitions. I had probably the most serious of those dances, if you will, with some of the people who were financing our company in the early years. And in this particular case, I had already built the company to probably about 150 people. We were doing research. We thought we were hot stuff. And I had raised $3 million, or we had raised $3 million in a first round. This is 1983. $3 million in 1983 was a lot of money. But we needed 20.
$3 billion now.
Could be, yeah. And it's a lot of money. And then in 85, we decided we needed more. We needed 25. And the bottom line was that the people who were prepared to give us that money, especially one individual, Tommy Davis, remarkable venture capitalist, one of the early venture capitalists in Silicon Valley, he put his arm around me and said, Ricardo, we can raise that money, but you have to step down from being CEO. You have to hire somebody with more experience, and that's just the reality of it. Of course, I rebelled. I thought, no, I'm running a company with 150 people. I'm hot. I mean, what are you talking about? Well, it took me about 3 weeks after which I decided, no, he's right. Now, why did I decide he's right? Because not so much that I was convinced that I couldn't do it, but the fact was that was the reality of the dynamics of raising money, and it was a question of either doing that and having a chance of building our company, or not doing that and staying where we were. So I stepped down, okay? So the dance can be a very serious effort, serious issue. But it is all part in the establishing of relationships and in persuading people that your idea and yourself as part of that works. I use the term dancer because I come from Latin America. I happen to love dancing. And actually lately, I am being challenged to learn one dance which is very complicated. It's the Argentinian tango. And I was thinking this afternoon as I was thinking about the remarks today, the tango is, and I'm going to write a post on that. I think the tango is a fascinating metaphor for the Argentinian tango, for what it takes to establish a relationship and really to establish the connection. Because, there's a leader and a follower in the tango dance. The leader, all the leader does has some idea on which way you want to go, but all you're doing is you invite your dance partner you invite the dance partner to take a move. Think about that. You're not moving. You invite, and then you have to sense whether that invitation is accepted. And only when it's accepted do you then follow through. Very much, it's more than just simple communication. I want to go there, okay, you go there. It's a much more subtle dynamic. Okay, let's get to lovers since we're talking Argentinian tango here. And what I mean by that is that at the end of the day, what you are doing when you are convincing others that your idea is a good one is you're making them fall in love with your idea and your passion. And I have innumerable examples of that love affair, if you will. And there are examples that go from as small as convincing a promising researcher to come and join you, and as large as convincing the CEO of Mitsubishi Oil to invest in your company. It's the same situation, because at the end of the day, companies do not talk to companies. People talk to people. And at the end of the day, it's an individual that captures you and what you are feeling and what you are representing. And in capturing that enthusiasm and the honesty and the integrity, that's when the connection is made. So that's what I mean by lover. In any event, it is this range of skills that if you're interested in moving into the entrepreneurial world, and by the way, if you want to convince people in your team as a leader to move in your direction, these are the things that you need to avail yourself. Which means, yeah.
I've been in a comment somewhere along my life. I heard that in order to be a good leader, you have to be able to have the capacity to follow.
You have to have the what?
The capacity to follow also. Is that true?
Yes, very much. That's part of the tango too. And in fact, interesting that you mentioned that. As you gather, I'm learning the tango, this Argentinian tango. What the teacher tells me is in order to be a good leader in the tango, I have to learn, literally, learn to dance the follower's part. And so part of the class is for me to actually learn the steps that actually my wife is supposed to be doing because of that. In my book, there's a wonderful little paragraph from Camus, Albert Camus, which says, don't go ahead of me because I may not be able to follow. Don't go behind me because I may not be able to lead. Walk besides me and be my friend. It's all part of the same romance, if you will, of the relationship that you set up. So in the persuasion area, how do you persuade? Well, you persuade by your total conviction. Your actions are really probably the most significant components of how you persuade. In my case, I persuaded others to join me and my partner when we started Catalytica by quitting a very good job and stepping out of the umbrella of Exxon and the, quote, security in those days. In those days, you still thought that companies like Exxon, Mobil, Dow, DuPont were totally safe, okay? Stepping out of that and starting with nothing. So your actions are very important. Boldness, obviously, sincerity, and integrity. And really, all of these come back to now probably the most important of the characteristics of both an entrepreneur and the leader, which is this third category. And this category is what permits you partially to persuade and partially to execute your ideas and your desire to build a company. Also, it is a key part of what I consider the key elements of a leader's character. And this is where entrepreneurship and leadership really come together. And so what are the elements of leadership, which certainly in my case applied very much as I was building a company, but will apply to all of you, I'm sure, as you build your careers and as you gain more responsibility. The first one is what I call the ability to absorb uncertainty. And until I reflected on this, as I was writing my book, I really didn't realize that I was doing that. But the more I thought about it, the more it really makes all of the difference in terms of creating your teams and creating the ability to lead others. And a case in point that you as engineers and scientists will in particular face is if you build a technically intensive company, you're likely to attract to your midst good scientific talent. And although we as scientists and engineers are trained, not only trained, but have a predilection to attack new territory, to try to solve new problems. It's a disposition to look at complexities in the world and trying to simplify them and saying, I'm gonna solve this. So you're always at the edge of an unknown from the standpoint of technical issues. But more often than not, at least in my experience, many of the people who came to work for us, they had a great capacity to be in the scientific unknown. But they had great difficulty with the risks that we were undertaking as a company. So the risk capacity from the standpoint of risking the ability, for example, to finance the company, or the assurance that we will have enough money to finish a project, was something that they couldn't cope with very easily. They could cope with an unknown, how to find a catalyst to solve a reaction, but they couldn't cope with the unknown of where am I going to get enough money so that we have money to pay our salaries 6 months or 3 months or 4 months from now. So the job of the leader is to take that burden, that part of the burden, off the shoulders of the people that come and are part of your team. And when you take it off their shoulders, you're basically saying, look, the financial side, let me worry about it. I'm going to do my utmost to get us financed. Relax. Don't worry about it. go and tackle the key job, which is to solve the technical problem. So it was a responsibility to unburden those of your team that have a different risk capacity to allow them to do their job. So absorbing uncertainty is very important. Not an easy job. And as you grow as leaders, it becomes harder and harder because as your responsibility expands, the amount of uncertainty that you're taking onto your shoulders gets heavier and heavier. I like to think of it as every time you convince somebody to trust you that you'll take care of the bigger picture while they take care of some of the pieces, you're taking on a trust packet. And the backpack, you put it in your backpack, and you keep putting trust packets in your backpack, and it gets pretty heavy, which raises a very interesting question that I've often asked myself, is how did I, as the head of the company, deal with my own fears and my own uncertainty? I didn't have others that I could unload my worries and my fears to, obviously. And it's a very interesting topic that we can talk about later. Or it's a topic really for an entirely new presentation, but it's an important one. The other one is the establishment of covenants. And I choose this word on purpose. Many of you may be familiar with the word covenants from a biblical standpoint. And in fact, in my mind, it was connected to the biblical sense of covenant. When you convince a researcher to join your team, and you convince the researcher to leave a very good position that they have at, I don't know, what are good companies nowadays? Intel or, hey, Apple, okay? And you convince them to come over to my side. In effect, when you actually make that connection, when they say, yes, I'm coming to follow our dream, the leader is making a very deep commitment. And that needs to be taken very seriously. And at the end of the day, those who become members of your team, who join you, sense that this is not, I'm not talking about a contract. You're not signing terms. I'm talking about the inner obligation that you as a leader engage in when you are accepting somebody else to join you. And it is probably the most difficult piece for a leader to really know or sense. And to me, it is one of the most important differences between leadership and management. Because a good manager is primarily chartered with the responsibility to carry out a set of tasks and achieve a goal. There is less of a necessity to enter into these more complicated personal relationships and obligations that are essential when you're building a team. Again, another topic for conversation of what's the difference between a manager and a leader. The other one is obviously, and I think we talked about that earlier, is the ability to treasure others. And that has a lot of complex implications, wonderful ones that apply to everything in our lives. And to a certain extent, it touches on the on an inner comfort zone with yourself. The more comfortable you are with yourself, which sometimes is called self-esteem, the more likely you will be in establishing relationship with others and allowing to get their trust. And in fact, at the bottom line is gaining trust. And it is that to me is key in building the fabric of an organization and certainly a company, and also it's key in the success of a company. Before I finish up and hopefully get ourselves into a little bit of a conversation here, let me come back for a moment to the three groups that I had here. The first group dealing with risk capacity, the second with the persuasion capacity, and the third, the execution capacity. Some of these characteristics are inalienable. I think I pronounced that right, inalienable. In other words, they are inner core and are essential, okay? And I would say the ones on the right, integrity, consistency, sincerity, those are deeply seated. Some of them, and they are very much yours or mine, they are part of your being. Some of them are shareable, and you can find others that can share the burden with you and therefore expand your capacity to build a company or lead a company. For example, I always think of the word visionary. I think somebody earlier had said the visionary is part of being an entrepreneur. I would propose, I for one don't consider myself very visionary, okay? And I don't believe the entrepreneur needs to be visionary. What the entrepreneur needs to be able to do is to fall in love with somebody else's vision and marry that vision fully. And in my case, what I think made it so much fun for us to build a company was that I found a partner who was the visionary. He always thought 5 steps ahead of everybody else. Now, he was not able to make sure that that vision is brought down to reality and can be carried out. That was my job. But I fell in love with his visionary capacity, and I connected with his ideas, I connected with his dreams, and I was able to then synthesize them and help us put them into effect. And so I didn't have to be the creator of the vision, as long as I truly participated in that vision. And I have many examples to give you about that. Probably the most significant one was when we were looking for a manufacturing facility for our pharmaceuticals. And we were looking for different plants. And we were thinking at the time, this was 95, 96, about facilities that would cost us maybe $40 or $50 million. That was the range we were looking at. And I get a call from him. He had just been to North Carolina. He says, Rick, I saw a plant. We got to buy it. It's the largest manufacturing site in the United States, and I think we can get it for about $300 million. Now, it needed my partner, Jim Cusumano, to see that and to be nuts enough to say, we're going to have this. And when I heard that, I said, come on. But I had enough faith in his, in the fact that there was some soundness to his ideas, often a lot, sometimes not so much, but most of the time a lot, that I said, okay, let's just tackle that. And it took us maybe 11 months to digest that. Not, you know, we had a board and we went through the process. And besides, at the time we were a small public company, and at first the concept of us buying that plant was totally ridiculous. But the fact is, we slowly worked our way through figuring out how to do it, and we did it, and in fact, it became a game changer for our company. I mean, it really transformed us. But again, the important message is, you don't have to be the visionary to be the entrepreneur, but you have to find somebody that has the vision, and you have to have the capacity to really connect with that vision. Okay, so what I want to leave you with is, you know, as you think about your careers and your future path, examine yourself in the quiet of your own head, you know, close the curtains, close the windows, nobody else in the room, and start asking yourself a few questions. And it's not a matter of judging good or bad, but it's a matter of really doing a very careful self-assessment. Ask yourself think about your own experiences in your young career and your young life of how you handled uncertainty. Just reflect on times when suddenly you were faced with a big unknown. Just ask, what were your feelings? What was your inner emotion? And just ponder it. Okay, again, no, it's no right or wrong. Just ponder it. Check whether you, when you look at an issue or a stumbling block or a problem, what is your natural first inclination? I can't handle that. Or do you say, son of a gun, this is an opportunity? Okay, where do you go from there? You know, how do you relate to that? There is a very interesting challenge that I had, and many of us have, is this balance between being optimistic and being realistic. Now, the fact is that if you're going to start a company, you better be optimistic, okay? I mean, you can't imagine going to somebody who you want to raise money and say, hi, I'm such and such. I got this great idea and I need $10 million, but let me tell you why I think it may not work. I mean, that's a non-starter, right? Okay, you have to be optimistic. But on the other hand, you also, as you start building your company, have to have some aspect of real, hard realism. And it's very difficult to hold both of them at the same time. In fact, it's the closest I've come to being schizophrenic is when, I remember a time when, okay, I'll give you the bad news, but we were almost running out of money. I mean, and this is something in my book, the last words are never run out of cash. Well, the fact is, when you start getting close to running out of cash, you are entering the danger zone. So we were, you know, I could see the curve. You know, it was going south. And yet, I was dealing with corporations and explaining to them why we were the greatest thing since anybody else they ever heard about. I needed to be very positive in my conversations on that end, yet I couldn't forget the fact that, my God, you know, 3 months from now, 4 months from now, oops. And so keeping that balance is very difficult, and a key way to handling it, and then we didn't even talk much about companions and other players that you surround yourself with. What saved me is that I knew I had somebody at home who was extremely rigorous on the financial side and knew what was happening and was watching it very carefully. And I could at least mentally put that aside when I was saying, these are the reasons why you should invest with me. So ask yourself in your own life, what is what's the balance between optimism and realism? And again, coming back to the key difference between leaders and entrepreneurs, the entrepreneur needs to be able to have total emotional investment in an idea. Total commitment. So ask yourself, how do you respond to that? And what you should remember is none of these are absolutes. All of these are issues you can work on. And the bottom line is really, the better you know yourself, the better leader you will be. So the exercise is a serious exercise to think through what are your strengths, but also what are your personality characteristics. And as you look forward to your balance of your educational career, and then also, if you are in business, also balance of building your own capacity as a leader, check some of these more personal things. Sure, you also can train better on understanding finances, figuring out what the SEC is going to be doing to you tomorrow, figuring out how to work with the FDA if you're in the drug industry, which is another story all in its own. But in terms of the leadership responsibilities, and especially if you have the responsibility for a whole company, these are the things you need to look at. Okay, I think on that note, I hope we continue the dialogue, especially in the next few minutes. I think do we have some time to do that? And then after that, you know, if you want to join me on my website or write to me, that's my email. I love to interact, especially with young people who are looking out to build their own companies. But I would very much enjoy answering any questions you may have. Thank you. Okay, go for it.
What if you're an older adult?
Say again?
What if you're an older adult and you would like to, say, open a soup shop or something like that? It's not a great adventure, but...
Okay, I'm old. And yeah, oh, sorry. The question is, what if you're an older person and you want to consider entering into entrepreneurship, considering businesses? You know, it's not about age. But I will be candid on the other side, though. It is about adrenaline level. So, you know, and this is okay. I mean, you can be a 60, 70-year-old and have all the possibilities to do something. You just have to be prepared that if you get into a business, at least the types that I've experienced, the adrenaline level necessary to stay at that intense point is enormous. And when I stopped, we sold the company in 2000 to good old DSM, okay? And so, and then I stayed on as CEO of the energy company, so I had a couple more years. So, okay, then we merged that with another company. My adrenaline level, which had been up here for a long time, you know, went down to a more calm, more, you know, more subdued level. I cannot imagine stepping back up that adrenaline curve. So it has nothing to do with age. It has more to do how you can gear up that adrenaline level. Good question.
Maybe the tango is raising the level a little.
Well, actually, for me, the tango is just making sure that my brain cells don't die. Yeah. Especially with a good partner.
Right.
Yes?
Do you have any advice for students who might be wondering, you know, should I get a job, should I take a leap and, you know, start a business, go into a venture? How do you decide? How do you think through that decision?
Good. That's a perfect question. A perfect question. First of all, I think you know it when you feel it. All right? You remember I said, what I had, as I characterize it, for most of my life, I grew up in an entrepreneurial environment. I had what I call the entrepreneurial itch. You know, you got this little itch. You know, I want to be on my own. I want to do my own thing, type of thing. Okay, that's fine, and many of us have it. And then you test a few things. You play mentally with a few. You talk to a few people. I think what really defines the move is when you get so freaking excited about something that you can't help yourself. I think that really defines it. You know, I joined Exxon because I was on Michel Boudard was my PhD advisor. I got my PhD, went to Exxon. You know, it's in those days part of the career path, and I was doing well at Exxon. And that was fine. I always had a little bit of this unsettledness about me. But then I met Jim Cusumano, we started talking, and then we said, darn it, this is it. And you go.
How old were you?
I was 29.
And it hit you. And it won you over your soul.
And it got me to the point where risk was no longer an issue. However, by then, so maybe you have an advantage. I'm going to not necessarily tell you not to start your family and so on, but by then I had a wife, 2 children, and quite frankly, I would not have been able to do it had my wife not said, let's do it, Okay, so there are other considerations, not just your own, so keep that in mind. But I want to bring one other thing up. Don't get seduced by thinking that if you see something and say, God, that would be a good idea, you need to dig in. And what I like to talk about is, in a way, I don't know if you have read Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers. If you haven't, I recommend it. What he talks about is most people who become successful need to put in 10,000 hours. Now, let's face it, if you're a chemical engineer, I see you are, you have a nice chemical engineering Princeton shirt, I like that. If you're a chemical engineer, you're putting in the hours, okay? And when you all add it up, by the time I started Catalytica at age 29, I had more or less put in my 10,000. So don't forget the 10,000. Mozart had to do it. Bill Gates had to do it. I haven't checked yet whether Steve Jobs, but that probably, okay? So the point is, which doesn't mean that you necessarily have to be the one that puts the 10,000 hours, but you have to find somebody who resonates with you, that has put it in, and then you have a serious opportunity. Does that help?
Yeah.
I think
Hold on just a second. I got.
I just have a comment on that.
Yeah, let me just take somebody, just a second. Yes?
A question. How do you, as an entrepreneur, sometimes you get so excited by an idea, how do you make sure that it's actually a good idea? Especially
Okay, yeah, I'll repeat the question is, as an entrepreneur, you get excited about an idea. How do you make sure it's a good idea? Okay, first of all, it depends on what stage you're in. If you are already in an entrepreneurial environment, then it is a function of just making sure you do all the necessary testing of the market and so on. I think the best answer I can give you is talk to people. Talk to people, not necessarily those who are naive enough that they will agree with you, but talk to critics, talk to people who may be skeptical. And then, importantly, see if you can persuade, hold on, let's go back. Yeah, here. Okay, see if you can persuade others, because you know you can't do it by yourself. So if you have a good idea and you work it up and you start getting some traction in your own mind, if you cannot convince others, good ones, with expertise, to join you, then you better reconsider. But once you get others involved, then I think then you have your path. And if you have the passion, you'll make it work. Then you have to be a good dancer and all that business. But first, make sure you talk to others. Don't just talk to yourself. It's too easy to sit in front of a mirror and get unanimous consent. Hold on just a second. What, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I just thought that you did the right thing. I think it's good to hang out at a big company for a short period of time, because you learn a lot.
Yeah.
You learn a lot of things that you don't learn in prison.
Yeah.
And you see how other people operate and what they do, and you can get yourself assigned to all kinds of different projects, and then you have a good time to look around. Then you have much more a good basis to start your own.
That's not a bad idea, and in fact, to us for me having lived through Exxon, permitted me to talk the Exxon language. And let's face it, in the first few years, and actually forever, we needed to talk to the Exxons and the Pfizers and the Roches, and So you do, either you do it yourself or you have somebody else associated with you. Yes?
How well did you adjust from answering to your VC partners to your shareholders when you were public?
How well did you
How did you adjust? Did you find yourself making an adjustment from answering to a few select people who were your original investors?
And then moved into the VC and the public market?
Compared to the public market?
I never adjusted. I did, obviously. I mean, I lived through the VC world and the public world. You have to understand the characteristics of each world. For those of you who didn't hear the question, how well did I adjust going into the venture capital funded operations and then moving into the public market? In a way, for us, it was a continuum, okay? And the adjustment really only happens when things get tough. You know, when things are going well, everything is positive, and you have that momentum, and quite frankly, you can be less than fully competent as a leader, and still, you know, you just get swept by the momentum. When things start getting hard, and it's when things get hard, if you are private, you don't have VCs, you're just private, you have maybe what is called angel investors, so you're a small, okay? That's one thing, because the people who are involved with you presumably understand the situation well enough that you can work with them. Next level, you start dealing with venture capitalists. And there, the crucial thing, and this is a hard one to swallow, a crucial thing is how much do they dominate the business. And for whoever is thinking of venture capital funding, a big piece of advice: before you go and get a venture capitalist to invest in you, build a good board of directors. If I can give you one piece of advice, build a good board of directors, because the venture capitalists influence you through their opinions at the board. And if there's only 2 board members and they're all venture capitalists, guess whose unanimity they decide on? And okay, and that dominant, because at the end of the day, the board is the governing entity that makes the decisions. You as the CEO carry those out, and without you, they don't have anything. But the board has a powerful voice. And my experience, fortunately, I had a board before my first VC came, which means the VC then has a good voice, but it is not a dominating voice. So that's, now, when you then move into the public market, that's an entirely different ballgame. And we can talk about that more. That's a harder one because, of course, while you're the excitement of the IPO and at the beginning, you know, everything is good. And if you're performing, no problem. But if you don't perform, the terrible thing about the public market is that it's incognito. You don't know who you're dealing with. I don't mind facing a venture capitalist and saying, you know, this is the way, eye to eye. And maybe he'll convince me or she'll convince me or whatever. But with the public market, you're talking into space. And it responds by either buying or selling your shares. So you look at the stock market. That's a funny situation to be in. Now, in reality, it's not that binary. In the early period, when one goes public, one has major institutional investors, and the institutional investors have clout because they hopefully dominate the book, as they say. And so you have people you're dealing with. But normally, they're people for whom you are just a one piece, you know, you are maybe 2 or 3% of their portfolio. They give you their 20 minutes and their wisdom in 20 minutes, and then they move on. So the public market is a difficult but necessary. I think most of us wouldn't be successful without the public market. Yes?
Could you share with us where your technology came from? Was it an unmet need that you saw from your experience working at Exxon?
The question was, where did my technology come from? In my case, when we left Exxon, we left to become research. We wanted to be we wanted to invent our own stuff. Okay, so bottom line, the technology came from our own inventions, but we built it up by first being a consulting company, and we grew the company by doing service to others, which means we invented for them. Then we got tired of inventing for others and started to try to invent ourselves, for which you need money, hence we went to venture capital. But once we developed that, they were our own inventions. But there is an interesting sub-chapter to that situation in that, and this is another, talking about being a dancer. We had over 100 patents by the time we got to the early 90s. Our own patents in the pharmaceutical area, manufacturing drugs using catalysts in the energy area, in the petrochemical area. The interesting thing is that where we ultimately became successful, I hate to admit this, had nothing to do with those patents. I mean, bottom line, if I look back, where did we really grow as a company? We grew by manufacturing drugs for others. And we became the largest outsourcing supplier in the Western Hemisphere. What did that have to do with catalysis? I hate to tell you, not much. But our catalytic excellence gave us the credibility for us to be able to convince Glaxo Wellcome to sell us a major manufacturing facility and make products for them. And then we went where the customer is. At that point, we started seeing that the demand was not really for our fantastic inventions. It was for solid, high-quality, total manufacturing capability in the pharmaceutical industry. And that just took off. Okay? So the lesson there is, dancer, if you have an idea, you know, mission statement, vision statement, mission statement, and I forgot what the third is. Strategy, okay, yeah. Mission, vision, strategy. Remember, those are just, at the moment, very good signposts, very good directions. But if you hit a wall, you better re-examine. And if it requires you to rewrite your mission statement, don't hesitate a moment to rewrite it if it gets you around the wall and move up. So, dancing. Yes?
In this day and age, it's a lot easier to start a company without venture capital financing. So I was hoping you could talk a little bit about the whole dilemma about accelerating growth, taking financing, versus having maybe a slower but steady growth and bootstrapping.
Boy, those are good. You know, it's interesting, though. You're saying in this day and age, but that is a statement that is sector specific. Okay.
In biotech, that's for sure.
Okay. So let's keep that in mind, you know. And so let's remember that there are sectors where it's just impossible to do without money, and you're back to the predicament where you're going to get it. And of course, never mind the biotech sector. It's being hammered left and right, both in venture capital as well as in the public market. But the more general question is how eager should you be to get financing to grow? I think in a way, to me, what matters is to decide how can you retain enough say in the direction of the business so that it does follow your and your team's, let's say, vision. You know what I mean. You and your team's inner sense of where to go. Because and I would say if you can retain that type of control, and I don't mean control in a voting sense, but in a sense of the direction of the company, at that point valuation is irrelevant. So if you need to raise money because you're going in this direction, and in the process you have less ownership of the business, I always have argued, I don't give a darn. I don't care about dilution as long as it enables me to go up there. Because the fact of the matter is, if I get up there, it's totally irrelevant. If I fail, it's totally irrelevant. Okay? The key is that you keep your ability to direct. And what's interesting is you can have a very strong influence even at the time when, I mean, we had a market cap of $1 billion at a point, okay? Now, how much of that did I own? Diddly squat, okay? But it was a dispersed ownership among, I think we had maybe 5,000 or 6,000 shareholders, okay? And the fact is, within a dispersed ownership, if your board is a solid board, you can keep moving your company as long as you don't start going south, and as long as you never run out of cash. Okay? But I'd be glad to talk specifics if you have one in mind and see whether it applies. Yes?
Did you have any difficulty
Sorry, I have to come closer because I can't hear you too well.
Do you have any difficulty in trying to decide where to do business, whether in South America or in...
Wait, what was your question? Did
you have any difficulty trying to decide where to do business, whether it's South America or the US?
The question is, did you have to decide where to do business? Is that what whether it's South America or elsewhere? First of all, I know because I did it where the opportunity was. But this is a little segue to a conversation I'm going to have tomorrow with your social entrepreneurship initiative. There's a lot of need in the developing world for entrepreneurs to help it. Okay, and in a way, although my family was received by Ecuador as escapees from Germany, and they built businesses there, I decided to come to the U.S. So for any of you who have a little bit of an internal sense that you should go back to your own country, or you should do something here, based here, but to help other countries, I strongly encourage you, not just for philanthropic, I don't want to use that word, not just because it is the right thing to do for humanity, but because there is a very large business opportunity in the expanding, underdeveloped world.
I think we have time for one more question.
Okay. I think we're there. Wait, there's one more question. Yes.
I guess I was curious, how long did it take you from starting the company to sell the company?
Oh boy. This is another, like the question, where's the gentleman that left who asked me about it, you can do it with less money these days. I'm in an industry, like many of you are chemical engineers or in the chemical business. That industry takes a long time to, life cycles there, as you know, are talked about in decades. It's not like an application, an app for a computer or something like that. So for me, we started the company in '74. It took us 10 years to build it to a point where we had an international solid reputation as scientists. And then we got into venture capital. So it took, we got venture capital 83, 84, 85, 86. Corporate financing 88, for better or for worse. Some of our friends who were our investors. 88, 89, 90. Then 93 we went public. And that's when things started picking up. 96, 95, we bought our plant in Greenville. So by 2000 is, so okay. So long period of time.
So I guess the follow-up question is a lot of people feel like to do serial entrepreneurship or start multiple companies. So what prompted you to stay with the same company as opposed to starting a different one?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned this. I've had an itch. You know that I have a blog and I post once in a while, okay, whenever I feel like it. Well, I have an itch right now. And it's an itch to write about this serial entrepreneur stuff. I believe, okay, I can't generalize because there are probably some extremely high quality serial entrepreneurs. But to me, the concept of serial and entrepreneurship doesn't work. An entrepreneur is doing it not because he wants to flip it and go to the next. An entrepreneur catches an idea and is passionate enough about it to make it grow. Now things happen, opportunities happen, you get bought out, fine. But I don't believe that, in my book, the concept of entrepreneurship and serial really fits. So I would say, you do what the opportunity calls for. In fact, there's another term which I often dislike. People talk about exit strategies, and you'll hear that, Venture capitalists, they love exit strategy. Okay, what's your exit strategy? And I say, baloney. I mean, how the heck do you ask me an exit? I'm not exiting. Now, you, Mr. Venture Capitalist, you want to have liquidity. So maybe why don't you ask me what is my liquidity strategy, but not my exit strategy? And serial entrepreneurship, you know, serial almost connotes serial other things. And so it, you know, it really to me is, you know, you do one, you do another, doesn't work. So I think if you're thinking of being an entrepreneur, focus, because serial really means, okay, I make a killing here, I go to the next one, make a killing here. It's not about money. That's why this point, somebody mentioned profit-driven. That is, I would say, secondary or maybe tertiary to the real substance that makes an entrepreneurial company. It's essential. My God, it's essential. That's what a company is there, because you're producing products that somebody likes enough to pay you for it and then some. And the better you do it, the more money you make. But it is it's a dependent variable, not an independent variable. Okay, so it's the same thing.
We also, oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, good.
Yeah, we just wanted to invite everyone to continue the conversation over with the reception afterwards, and just wanted to say thank you once again for a
pleasure.
wonderful.
Thank you.